Hello and welcome to The Voice of the People. I'm your host, Nicholas Qualick, and today we're talking about election integrity. Joining me now is the North Dakota Secretary of State, Michael Howe. Secretary Howe, thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me on.
It's our pleasure. And let's first, before we get into the weeds, as they say, let's go back a little bit and tell me about how you got interested in this line of work, I suppose.
Yeah, well, I served in the state house for 6 years. I was elected in 2016 and served all the way up into my election as Secretary of State November 2022. Um, in a previous life, I was a family farmer, fifth generation North Dakotan on our farm out by Castleton. And the election process has always sparked my interest. My mom was a poll worker. My very first election I remember was the 1992 election. Bill Clinton was elected president. Ed Schaefer was elected governor. My predecessor, Al Jaeger, was first elected to the Secretary of State's position. And I was in kindergarten then, Nicholas. But I remember my mom leaving early in the morning to help set up the polls and coming home by the time I was in bed on election night, 1992. So that really kind of started my interest in elections. And our family, we've the first person in my family to be elected to a position, but I always had been involved in our local district party. And that was always the topic of conversation at our dinner table.
Well, without giving our ages away, Mr. Secretary, I can tell you that's probably the first election I can remember too. But anyway, that's another conversation for another day. So,
Yeah.
so you mentioned that your predecessor, Secretary Al Jaeger, this is your first major election as our Secretary of State. So, what are you feeling right now?
It's I tell people our office has been preparing for the 2024 election since the second the polls closed in November 2022. So Secretary Jager has laid a great foundation as we got started. I came into office in January of 2023. Those first 4 months in office, we were focused on the legislative session. Once we got that put in the rearview mirror, really hammered down the process for 2024. So we've been meeting. We went around the state this last summer, met with every county auditor. How can our office help them conduct their jobs? The Secretary of State's office, we oversee the entire election process across the state, but who really runs those elections is each individual county with our support and guidance. Just this week, we had our state election conference that's mandated by Century Code that the Secretary of State's office puts that conference on for our county auditors. We do training with equipment, best practices, go over the Century Code. Had great attendance there. And so, yeah, we're in the thick of it now. It's beginning of March. Ballots can be mailed out to absentee voters on May 2nd. And of course, we've got the June 11th primary. So we've been doing our due diligence, and I've got the utmost confidence that the June primary as well as the November election will go off without a hitch.
Mhm. Well, you mentioned getting into the thick of it, and we won't go into specific details, but as you know, there's been quite a lot of talk over the last couple of years about, integrity and so on. What's the number one misconception you want to clear up right now for North Dakotans?
Our elections can be trusted, and they've been proven time and time again that they can be trusted. In the summer of 2022, the state auditor conducted an independent audit of our election processes. That audit came back in October of 2022. Full audit report can be read on our website, sos.nd.gov, as well as the state auditor's website. And what you'll find out is our election systems are incredibly secure in the state of North Dakota. And part of that security is our paper ballot tabulators are not connected to the internet. We utilize paper ballots. So if something were to happen on election day, the power goes out, a tabulator malfunctions, we have that source of truth in that paper ballot to do a recount, find a working machine, or if out of necessity have to do a hand count, we could do that too. So uh, those are the main points I really want to get across to North Dakotans. And also be aware there's 50 different election laws in the United States. North Dakota's election laws are far different than Georgia's election laws. North Dakota's election laws are different than California's. And really, having that basic understanding that of what you might see occurring in another state won't always apply to the state of North Dakota in our election process.
And speaking of which, you mentioned all the different laws and so on. If people may have not voted in the last general election, is there anything new that you want them to know about for this general election?
So the state legislature in the 2023 session took election integrity matters very seriously. And I guess I can say this being a past former legislator, but the legislature, even before my time, had always taken election law very seriously. So this past session, I guess the major change that the legislature implemented was House Bill 1431. This cleared up a bit of a loophole in our election law. If you remember back in October of 2022, there was an attorney general's opinion as to what to do if a voter shows up to the polling location and on their ID it indicates they're non-citizen. But then that voter verbally said, "Well, actually, I am. I just haven't updated my ID." There was nothing in Century Code that would prohibit the election worker from giving them a ballot to fill out and cast. The legislature, and with our support, cleaned up that loophole in Century Code. So now, if you need to have the most up-to-date identification card when you go to the polling location, if you go and show up and your ID says or indicates you're not a citizen, you can still fill out a ballot, but that's going to have to go into a set-aside envelope, and then you'll have to go get your ID updated, and then you'd have 13 days between the end of when the polls close to when the canvassing board meets, and you can cure your ID with your county election official saying, yes, I am indeed a United States citizen. And then the canvassing board will meet, take your ballot, and run it through the tabulator and have it be counted.
But going along with that too, I mean, I know there are certain people that want every piece of uh, every piece of this process just guarded so strictly. There has to be some trust in there between both the voter and the officials, let's call them. Should there not be?
Well, I mean, of course, it's trust in the institution, trust in your government, but we also do have plenty of safeguards in place too, checks and balances, laws that have to be followed. Um, I'm often asked, well, what if? Well, what if? Well, what if? A lot of times it's, well, that's breaking the law. And if you're breaking the law, whether it's the election law or whatever piece of Century Code, uh, I know with election law, you will be prosecuted the fullest extent of the law. So there's plenty of safeguards in place in the state of North Dakota to ensure that your ballot is counted accurately and securely.
And so we have the big election coming up. So what have you heard other than, the things that we've mentioned? What are some of the other concerns that your office has gotten specific to basically just not necessarily the general election, but any sort of primaries or anything like that?
So there's been a lot of curiosity, I'll call it, and we welcome that. Uh, we welcome the people in North Dakota contact our office. Let us be the trusted source of election information. There's a lot of things you can read out there, um, but also verify the source of your information. Uh, Effort from our office, we're putting that information out in the stratosphere for people to consume. If you see our SOS logo on there, that's our trusted source. If you've had a conversation with somebody and it just doesn't seem quite right, please call our election division office and get the real answer and the trusted source of information. So, yeah, we've heard a lot of the ballot tabulators. Can they flip votes? Are they connected to the internet? No, the paper ballot tabulator is not connected to the internet. Once you slide your paper ballot through that machine, that simply counts the ballot. It's not digitally transmitted to somewhere else. It counts your ballot, and then that paper ballot is stored in the machine to when the polls close. It doesn't have the capability to be hacked or flip votes. So basic things like that, we get a lot of questions regarding that. We've run public tests. We've had the election equipment on hand for the public to see. We conducted those in front of the legislature this most recent legislative session. Every county before the primary election and before the November election will run a public test. Any member of the public can attend those and see for themselves, see the election equipment, and see that it's not connected to the internet and the votes can't be flipped.
So basically, all this to say, there are a lot of things you're doing, but there's only so much that you can do to, I guess, earn the trust of someone. At some point, they just have to let go and say, you know what, they know what they're doing, and this is how it is. Correct?
Well, I guess I would disagree with that. We've got, I think we're very transparent in the process.
Sure,
So
sure,
it's not even just trusting us, it's see for yourself
right.
or
But at
calling
some point,
us and
even
see.
that can go only so far. Correct?
Well, sure. And we're utilizing different sources of social media to get that information out to the public. Having conversations with you, Nicholas, too, to get this information out to the public. We're really trying to utilize a full education strategy for the people in North Dakota to understand the process, be comfortable with it, and knowing when they fill out their ballot, slide it in the ballot tabulator, that their vote's going to be counted and be counted accurately and securely.
Let's step away from the upcoming election for just a second, Mr. Secretary. What's been the biggest um, surprise for you personally taking over as a Secretary of State now?
Well, it's a different role. You're going from for me, I'm going from the legislative branch to the executive branch. We've got a tremendous staff here in the Secretary of State's office, a very veteran staff too. We've got some employees that have been here when Ben Meyer was Secretary of State, and Ben Meyer was Secretary of State from 1955 to 1988. Um, in our election division, we've got Leanne Oliver, who served in her role since 1990. So coming into an office with great people to work with, that's been a big help of learning on the fly. I was no election expert. I was not an expert of all the duties of the Secretary of State's office, but we've got great people assisting me that are tremendous public servants for the people of North Dakota. And that's been a fine and great help to me as relatively new coming into this office. But I mentioned earlier, I was sworn in on January 3rd. As soon as the pomp and circumstance of that was done, I had to go before the Senate Appropriations Committee and talk about our office budget, a budget that I didn't prepare, Secretary Jagger prepared. And so I was had to learn very quickly about that process. And then the end product, we put a little bit of our own flair to that budget process, but at the end of the day, the legislature appropriated the dollars needed to conduct the functions of our office. And we do have over 40 different duties within this office, from elections to business filings, combative sports. Not many people are aware of that, that if you want to have a sanctioned and licensed combative sports event, whether it's MMA or boxing, you'll come through our office to get that license and conduct that fight.
As you say, there is no substitute for experience. So it sounds like you have quite a
Right.
good assistance, well-seasoned assistance there. So, as the new Secretary of State, what's one goal that you're looking to sort of maybe improve upon or add as you go forward in your new position?
So our business filing system, Secretary Jagger was able to get that online. So if you go to our First Stop website application, you can do your business filings online. So that was implemented in 2018 or 2019, right around there. And that current version is that version 2.0. So now we are here in March of 2024. We're still on version 2.0. So the legislature appropriated dollars for us to go up to the most current version, version 5.0. We're currently going through that process. Hopefully, we'll have that online by the summer of 2025. A new campaign finance system. Our office is in charge of campaign finance filings. That's for the public. That's for you folks in the media. We want to be as transparent and open as possible about our campaign finance laws. Our current system, I would say, is difficult to use. When something that's supposed to be transparent is difficult to use, I don't think it's achieving the goal as desired. So we've put a request for proposal up for a new campaign finance system that obviously won't be in place here for the 2024 election cycle, but in 2026 we'll have a brand new gadget for everyone to play with our new campaign finance system, and then also a newer system too. ND Voices is our, I guess, our central nervous system in the election process of how we communicate with each individual county for election night reporting, for ballot styles to be approved in each county, each precinct. That is also getting an upgrade. So that might not be a public facing thing, but certainly will be a help to the public in conducting an election. And certainly the counties will appreciate it too.
Similar to those issues, one of the things that we've covered, and I know, we talked about it in the past here with election signatures. I know that there is a sample taken of ballots for signatures when people are applying for petitions and so on. Is it feasible, if you were to come up with the funds to be able to dedicate staff to look over every single signature for validity's sake?
So, Nicholas, we do go through every single signature. You mentioned that sampling aspect. Yeah, we do send out 4,000 postcards to people that were written on the petition process, saying, "Hey, Nicholas, we noticed you signed this petition. Can you verify that you did? Please send this postmark card back to us."
Mhm.
Uh, I mentioned Leanne Oliver's name, as she's been the statewide expert in this for this office.
Mhm.
And we're just doing that right now, by the way, with the congressional age limit petition. And Leanne said, if we start receiving a bunch of postcards back, that's a major red flag that there could be potential fraud. Most people will say, throw it in the garbage. But if we're getting a lot of postcards back that say, I don't remember signing this, I certainly did not sign this, I didn't do this,
Mhm.
then we would certainly investigate a little more, work with the Attorney General's office on that process as to next steps and whether or not to approve that petition to go onto the ballot.
Okay, because I would have, I mean, is there a level at some point where you go, wow, these are just way too many signatures and we can't get to every single one to validate them?
So we use our central voter file, which is we partner with the DOT. So if we've got Michael Howe that signed it, we could enter Michael Howe's information into the central voter file to see where his address, see if it matches up on the address he listed. I just moved a year and a half ago from West Fargo here to Bismarck for this new role. So if I hadn't updated my address and I signed my name with my Bismarck address, but perhaps in the central voter file it wasn't updated, um, we're not going to flag that. We're going to say it looks like it's a verified signature. His address is a North Dakota address for a statewide measure. We would let that go. But we've got very trained individuals who can seek out that, hey, this signature looks a little fishy, or if we do look it up in the central voter file, this person isn't listed as, or this person in our system is listed as a non-citizen. Again, we would flag that um, for rejection of that individual signature.
Right. So again, as you say, you're taking as many steps as humanly possible as you can and legally
Yeah,
possible to make sure everybody's election or petition system works and make sure that people are comfortable with that.
yeah. The power of the people. They can change North Dakota Century Code. They can gather signatures for a statutory measure with 2% of the state population. So that's about 16,000 signatures. All the signatures or all the petitions out for circulation for this election cycle so far have been for constitutional changes. So then you need 4% of the statewide population signing off on that. So that's a little over 31,000. And that's a very serious process. I mean, we're changing the state's most sacred document, the Constitution. And only the people of North Dakota can change the Constitution. I try to remind everybody that. The legislature can't do that. The governor can't do that with the stroke of an executive order. Now, the legislature, they can pass resolutions and propose questions on the ballot that would change the Constitution, but the people of North Dakota have that final say. So when someone's out there gathering signatures to change the Constitution, our office takes that very, very seriously. Again, that's our state's most sacred document. And again, only the people can make that change and have that final say. So we want to share if we're approving something that's going on the ballot for the people to decide, we want to make sure that's an accurate and fair and legal question that's being placed on the ballot.
Certainly not an easy task for the eyeballs, but nevertheless, very, very valid and serious to make sure that
Yes.
everybody's vote counts. So going forward, Mr. Secretary, what are you looking forward to this upcoming elections cycle?
I'm excited. I said we just had our first conference with the county auditors, our statewide conference. We
Yep.
will have regional trainings coming up in the next few weeks. Again, those are optional. So we'll be going around the state, again, meeting with county officials, county commissioners, poll workers, getting them trained in on the process as to what needs to be done on election day. We're going to have that continued education as well, what we talked about earlier about the process, getting that information out in the hands of North Dakotans, getting them comfortable with the process. Um, I feel if someone is comfortable with the election process and trusts it, they're probably more apt to vote. And that's always a good thing. Our specific goal in this office isn't to drive voter turnout. But if we can increase that confidence in the voter and voter turnout is increased as a result of that, I think that's a good thing too.
Kind of an unusual hypothetical, but I'll ask it anyway, I guess. If there was one thing that you wish you could change with a snap of your fingers, what would it be for voters?
Oh, I would say the petition process. Uh, we sign documents all the time, whether you're buying a house, it's a digital signature. I wish we could implement that process with the snap of a finger. Um, Again, there's millions of dollars every day transacted in this country with digital signatures. If we could somehow figure out a way and get the funding to get that process here in North Dakota to change the Constitution or change a state statute, that would be a big relief to our office. And I think a much more secure process too, an accurate process and cleaner process to give the power to the people in changing those sacred documents.
And before we go, Mr. Secretary, a final word to the people watching our podcast.
2024, there's a lot at stake. You've got choices. Of course, the presidential election is going to get a lot of airtime. It's those down ticket races that are so important. Your school board, your city, your county. Don't forget about those races either. And don't just vote in presidential elections. Every election matters just as much. Yes, this is a presidential year. It's going to have a ton of spotlight on it. But even in those off years, when you've got a city or a school board election, if you have the right to vote, you're a North Dakota citizen, you're 18 years of age and have lived in your precinct for 30 days, exercise your right to vote in the state of North Dakota. These are your neighbors. These are your friends. These are the leaders that you want running your political subdivision. Make your voice heard. I really encourage that.
Okay, well, Mr. Secretary, I cannot thank you enough for all your time that you've spent with me today here on the Voice of the People. And thank you for letting us kind of getting a little bit more of an inside look. I know we don't necessarily have time on the news, as we say, to kind of get into this for 25 minutes or so. But again, thank you so much for taking the time. And thank you for joining us for this episode of the Voice of the People. We'll be back next week with more questions and answers affecting you, because remember, it's your voice that matters, the voice of the people.